It's April the 16th in 2023, and we have a very, very special show for you today. So let's just get right into it and jump into a very special. Well, that was a little too fast because I didn't get a chance to actually get out my morning joke, but that's okay. We'll just dive into it. So this is a very special show today because we just recently lost an icon in the Florida cannabis industry. Bob Platshorn, a.k.a. Bobby Tuna, head of the Black Tuna gang, passed away just on April 1st after a very short illness that kind of like took him very quickly. And we thought we would bring on people who knew him the best to go ahead and give him the great tribute that he so richly deserved. Isn't that right, Chris?
Yes. Robert Platshorn, Bobby Tuna, however you knew him, was, a great man in the sense that he had a great passion for making sure that this system of prohibition that exists in this country is wrong. It's unjust. It needs to fall. And, for those who may not know, he was really instrumental in helping us get Florida where it is today through his education of senior citizens by founding the Silver Tour and traveling all around the state, talking to, the largest, group and demographic of folks who are against marijuana legalization and sharing with them both the benefits of cannabis therapy and how prohibition is destroying the American family. And we have medical marijuana today in Florida in no small part to the efforts of Robert Platshorn.
I should introduce ourselves. It's one of those mornings. Again, a lot of us are under the weather right now. I guess it's just one of those kind of things. But I'm Gary Stein, your political director for Suncoast NORML. Above me to my right is our executive director coming to us from above the Beltway, where he hits him below the Beltway. Christopher Cano, and to my upper left, I think you're right, is our deputy director and owner of not only the Chillum's Glass Gallery and CBD Gallery, but soon to be owner of Chillum 2 coming up, and that is Carlos Ermida.
Thank you.
And sitting to his right, our left, is the lovely Miss Mary Newman, who was also working with Bobby Tuna at the very during those last couple of years, and she's a little under the weather herself, but she was grateful to come on in and give us a little insight as to where Bobby came from and what he was doing. Now, Bobby, for those of you who don't know, was unfortunately arrested by the feds in the 1970s for with very, very little evidence, I should say, for smuggling cannabis at that time, which was pretty much the only way we could get it besides growing it in our backyard. And, well, Mary, give us a little insight as to where Bobby came from and how he started working in cannabis.
Well, Bobby grew up in Philadelphia, the son of a shopkeeper. And I think he was born into the role of pitchman. Ever since he was a young boy, he'd be out there, coaxing people to come into his mother's shop and buy new shoes or, a new dress. So it was sort of in his blood. I'm not exactly sure how the whole smuggling story began, but I know that he did not identify himself as Black Tuna Gang. That came about after he was busted and brought into an FBI questioning room, and he looked around and saw all these boxes labeled Black Tuna Gang, Black Tuna Gang. And he said, "What is all this stuff?" And I said, "Well, that's you." That's how the name came about. And then obviously he received that 69-year sentence, served 30 and came out.
69 years.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And came out after 30 and just came out roaring like a lion. He was bound and determined to see change occur. And that's what he set about to do.
Yeah, you said he was a pitch man. He once told me he knew Ron Popeil.
Oh, yes. His greatest competitor.
For those of you who don't remember Ron Popeil, you have to be at least my age. He was the inventor of the pocket fisherman.
Yeah. Actually, just a few weeks ago, one of those pocket fishermen was found in Bobby's belongings in the garage or something. So yeah, he still has one.
And he was a heck of a fisherman himself. I'm certain he did not use the pocket fisherman, though.
Oh no, not at all. Every chance he got, that's where he wanted to be. And yeah, Karen's going to tell some fishing tales. I'm sure.
Yeah,
She and Bobby did a lot of fishing together.
Speaking of people that could talk about Bobby Tuna, Karen just came on, so let's bring her on for the sake of everything we got going on. Hey, Karen.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Karen.
Yep. So yeah, gosh, I met him. I think we started our normal chapter right after he got released from prison, and he reached out to us almost immediately. He really wanted to work.
So just to give a little context, right? So there are many different normal chapters. This podcast, of course, is Suncoast Normal's chapter. But when me and Cano first decided that we wanted to start a normal chapter, one of the main things I did was I drove down to South Florida to speak to this woman, Karen Goldstein, because the head of the normal chapter here started Florida Normal. So I just wanted to give a little context. I wanted people to know who they're talking to, and Bobby Tuna was hugely involved in Normal Florida, and
Yes.
as far as normal chapters go, as far as normal chapters in Florida go, Normal Florida has been through it all. I mean, basically.
Well, yeah, he became a board member of ours. Actually, he wasn't, merely involved. He actually joined our board, and when he started the Silver Tour, which some of you may or may not know about, I'll describe in a second. It was originally a project of him and our chapter, and but Bob's personality was larger than life, so it became the Bob Show, and it went with him. So the Silver Tour's purpose was to teach senior citizens the benefits of marijuana for various ailments. He liked to say, would you rather wake up with a smile on your face, after eating a cookie, or wake up not knowing if you got into your car naked and drove across town, and talking about the reports people were getting about certain sleeping pills. So, that was one of the things he used to mention to people, which was always a winner in a large group of senior citizens. And, he was just such a great storyteller. And by the way, one of the reasons that his sentence was so long was because it was said that he threatened the life of the judge. And because that never really happened, I think that was part of the reason his sentence was reduced. Originally, it was, I think, 69 and a half years in jail, and ended up being 29 and a half years. So,
so threatening the life of a judge and their family is actually a bad thing?
Yeah, apparently it is. Yeah, we did some fishing. He loved to go fishing. Used to charter fishing trips regularly, almost monthly. Some of the other people you'll speak to today, Danko and Rhory, have, we've all been out fishing together, and it was just always nice, fun. Excuse me. He always found fishing boats that, in particular, that would allow us to medicate. And we just had a good time. He just loved to be on the water, as do I. And we just really bonded over fishing, the ocean, boating, outside of all the activism that we were doing. When he started the Silver Tour and was looking for locations, I had an aunt who lived in Century Village in Pembroke Pines.
Oh man, I know Century Village.
And you can't get into Century Village if you're doing anything political, or unless you're already in office and you're, hosting a breakfast or a lunch or something. But really, it's very difficult to get in there. So what we did was we actually arranged for a silver tour to be done at the synagogue right in Century Village, but not actually politically or financially part of Century Village. And we had a wonderful turnout. It was amazing. And since it was one of the first silver tours that we did, we were kind of feeling our way through it. It went along. You have to excuse me. I'm not an early riser, so I just gotta. And we all wake up with these kind of lungs, I guess, at this point. So we did really well at that silver tour. We were collecting signatures already at that point for the petition, and we had lots of enthusiasm for the petition there. It got us off to a really good start. So it was wonderful, and it was great being part of it. And then he surprised me by calling me up to speak that day. But I was, it was okay. It was my aunt's congregation, I guess you want to call it. And again, place was packed. It was standing room only, and we got great support from it. Puffum, as you may or may not know, some of you, was the original organization that started the medical marijuana petition in Florida. A young mother named Kim Russell started it. And when John Morgan stepped in, they revised the language and started over collecting signatures. But Puffum was still the organizing group behind it. And when they were first getting started, Kim wanted, she was from the Melbourne area, and she wanted someone down here in this area to help get a cohesive group together, volunteers. And so I found, because we are a nonprofit, we're able to use the library for meetings, the public library. And so we arranged out in Pembroke Pines in the library for the first regional Puffum meeting. And that was when I first met Bob in person. We had spoken a lot on the phone. We got to know each other. We got, kind of really friendly, kind of familiar with each other on the phone, but we had never met. But when we met each other, it was such an immediate, cohesive relationship that one of the people there at one point came over to me and said, "Would you give a message to your husband?" I said, "My husband?" We just hit it off like that. So it was nice.
Now, Bobby wants to mention that he actually organized an entire bus to come up to Tallahassee to go ahead and do that. He was the first one to actually do that kind of major organizational effort.
Yep, the rally and tally.
Yeah.
Yep, we had a lot of fun. There was actually a few buses picking people up from different places. And when we got up there, we were supposed to set up in that area between the buildings. Chris, you probably know the name of it. I can't think of it right now. Like a quad right in the middle outside of the house and
the courtyard.
Yeah, it's as good as any. And it was so super windy that the people, we had hired a group to set up tents for us. But, we were going to have food outside and speakers and music. And it was so windy there that they couldn't do it. They couldn't put up the canopies, and it was raining. So he found us a space, I think on the 5th floor, if I'm not mistaken, a big room, and we relocated to there. And we set out food, and we invited legislators. We sent people out to invite the legislators to join us. And so we could have one-on-one time with them as much as possible, in addition to the meetings that we had set up with all of the legislators. And it was a very successful day. I think it made a big impact. And it was done properly. It was done with respect, and it was done politely, and we were not loud or overwhelming. We showed that we were grown-ups and that we were, as I said, respectful, and that was, I think, a good impression for us to make.
If you had one memory about Bobby that really stands out, that kind of antithesis who he was, what do you think it might be?
Probably once when we were out fishing, and he was struggling and struggling and struggling to bring this fish in, and the look on his face when he brought it in was everything. It was just such joy, and it wasn't even the fact that he caught a fish, because he caught fish all the time, but it was just, he was just so happy being out on the water, and that was it for
Well,
him.
Karen, thank you for everything that you do throughout your life and everything that you've done with Bobby. Thanks for sharing everything today. And I think we can. We got a big schedule today, so I think we can let you go about your morning and maybe get an extra nap in or something.
Well, thank you, and thank you for doing this. It's very nice, very kind, and very thoughtful of you all. Thank you. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing the rest of it.
Thanks for joining, Karen.
Okay.
Okay.
Our next speaker is the writer of the Celeb Stoner website, which is absolutely fantastic. If you ever have a chance to look at it, you get so much insight into what's going on right now in the cannabis world. And of course, was a major influence at High Times magazine. Steve Bloom. Steve, how you doing today?
I don't think Steve's on. I don't see Steve's face here.
Okay, Gary.
Okay.
Oh, Danny and Rhory are on though.
Okay, well, switch it around.
So Rhory's been around, been waiting for a little while.
We are highly professional in an unprofessional way. Hey, Rhory, how you doing?
Okay. How you doing?
I know you're a little under the weather yourself. I mean, everybody seems to be like, Bobby didn't want to be upstaged by anybody, so I'm thinking he's probably in charge of everybody being sick right now, so that he could be front and center, and we all look dead. Okay, Rhory, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know basically what you do and how you first met Bobby.
Right now I'm the owner of Arbourside. And I met Bobby actually through my mom sending me these articles about some man teaching the seniors about using cannabis, over opiates. And she just kept sending me these articles. I have to meet this guy, So I actually gave him a ring, and I ended up meeting him, and we've been like best friends from the day I met him. It's just me and him were like brothers. We went fishing numerous times. I mean, that's where that was his happy land. Going fishing and getting people together to do it. That's one thing Bobby was great at, getting people together.
Very much so.
Now you're a major cultivator. You've done some absolutely amazing work, and Arbourside is, I guess, like the antithesis of a lot of that work which unfortunately we don't get in Florida.
Mm.
We are major boof country over here. We would love to see some of the things that you do up there in Michigan right now.
Yeah. You know how everything that something gets chucked in to make things hard for us? That's what they do, as far as the government goes. But yeah, they're trying to take away some of the rights that they gave us. And we won't stand for it in Michigan. That's all. They're trying to get rid of all the caregivers. So the corporate places can take over.
Yeah, well, and Bobby was well aware of the government being attempting to control the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Is that basically how you got in contact with him?
Yeah, I like I said, I ended up meeting him, and from the day I met Bobby, we were just great friends. We do a lot of things together when I was down in Florida.
Rhory, wasn't it great that after Bobby bought the condo just recently, it ended up being like right around the corner from you?
Exactly. I literally
that came as such an added bonus, He had been
Yeah.
looking, and he found his spot, and that was the first thing he said. "You're not going to believe it. Rhory's right around the corner." Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I would call him up. I'm
Gould
just
didn't smoke
driving.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Yeah, I'd be driving and I'd be like, Bobby, what are you doing?
Yeah.
All right, let me pop over. Let's smoke one.
Yeah, Bobby really loved that.
Yeah. It was just, we had a good 10 months of that. I wish we would have had at least, like 5 more years of that.
Yeah.
This whole thing happened so quickly. Um, I don't know if Bobby knew the seriousness of what he had and just
No, I don't
hit.
think so.
Yeah.
Bobby was not a doctor goer. The only doctor Bobby was interested in seeing at all was his medical marijuana provider.
Yeah.
Not that that's not important.
No, that's very important for sure. But an occasional,
Yeah.
might be a good idea.
Because he finally got his, his spot, his
Yep.
dream.
Yep.
And then it lasted 10 months,
Yep.
and that's is
But he made it, it's
exactly.
but
He
it's still
did.
a shock though, Rhory. I find it just still surreal. It's almost like on the daily I go to pick up the phone and it's a bit of a shock, like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was just so fast. But the blessing is that he didn't suffer.
Yeah. I mean, I was with him, Jesus, what was it, 6 weeks before this all went down. And he was fine.
Yeah.
Then I went back to Michigan and I came back to Florida and he wasn't so fine.
Yeah.
I went over there and hung out with him. And yeah, it was really, a surprise to me. And just, it's definitely hit me hard.
Yeah, I get you, Rhory. Me too.
Well, what was one of your favorite
Definitely.
memories of Bobby, either on or off the boat?
Both. I always had a good time with Bobby. We'd go out to dinner at great places. He loved that Okeechobee Steakhouse, which once he introduced me to it, I loved it too. Yeah, so we would go out to dinner and we'd get some people together and do it. It was like always a get together, which is, having people around that we, all cared about each other and we all knew each other and we all had a good time. And then on the boat,
And we all liked weed.
yes, that's something
Yeah.
we all have in common.
Sounds like a reoccurring theme here.
Yeah.
I honestly I didn't know Robert Platshorn too well. We kind of did our thing in different circles, but it sounds like this gentleman, whether it was a rally or a fishing trip or getting together at a restaurant, he just wanted to be around his friends and wanted to have a good time.
Yeah, very much a social creature for sure.
Rhory, can you share? Like, I understand that what's happened is tragic, but I think it's very important in these times to really think about a celebration of life.
Yes.
What do you think is the best thing about Robert Platshorn's life? What did his life give to you?
It showed me a lot because Bobby was behind bars for so long, and when he came out, he still had a smile on his face. Me, I'll tell you straight out, if I did the time that he did, I would have been bitter as hell. And he was not bitter one bit. Never really mentioned that. I mean, he told me all kinds of stories, and they were funny stories that happened while he was locked up, but for him, to finally get his freedom, he actually flew out. We flew him out to Seattle. This was 2014. And he just joined our crew. And it was such a happy time when he got out and he was free of having a parole officer to talk to all the time. He told me stories about that, how his first parole officer was a good guy, used to let him travel. So Bobby would hit all those, high times. events in California, but then that parole officer passed away, and then he got some. Can I say dickhead on this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he got some dickhead as a parole officer.
You can be as salty as you want. I mean, fuck it.
All right. Well,
Who gives a
and
shit?
that guy would not let him travel anywhere. So he was stuck in Florida, and then finally he got released. And the second he got released, he was on a plane, and he made it out to Seattle, and he had a great time there. We had a great time there, and that's Bobby
Yeah.
having a great time.
Yeah.
You know, whether he was free or not. I don't know because he's never told me about any get-togethers he had in prison, but I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rhory. That magnetic social personality of Bobby's really, I think, carried him through to a great extent for all those years.
Mm?
He became an expert Italian cook, and he got kitchen
I love
privileges
Italian
in
food.
prison and would cook. And what did he call himself? Almost like a consigliere for the Italians in prison. He was making connections inside and outside. And in all the stories, I never heard Bobby complain about anything.
Mm-hmm.
He was always positive and always thinking about what's the next best thing we can do? What are we going to do to push this forward? What are we going to do? Always positive and always, that love of people and wanting to bring people together.
Mary, you give me this visual of Bobby cooking, in the prison, like that scene in Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Chopping up
That's
some
exactly what I
garlic.
was thinking.
Nice, the garlic,
Very,
nice
very
and
much
big.
so.
Talking about, hey, how are we going to legalize this marijuana when we get out of
Very
here?
much so. And over the last few years, we'd be on the phone sometimes and I might be cooking and he'd say, well, what are you doing? What are you cooking? And I'd tell him and he'd correct me. No, that's not the way you do that.
Well, Lenny was the good cook in the family there.
Well, Bobby learned a lot somewhere along the line. He was a
Yeah.
pretty good guy in the kitchen, I'll tell you that.
His
Roy-
wife was a great cook. I mean, and they would invite me over, and we'd have. It was like she cooked just like my mother.
Yeah.
That was a very big treat. It was great hanging out with the two of them. But
Yep.
then, what happened with Lynn, that was very unexpected too. I mean, she wasn't doing well, but she went in for surgery on her shoulder and never came out, and even that, Bobby, he's upset, but he never showed it. Here it is. He finally gets some freedom, and he loved her so much.
Oh, so much.
Yeah, I mean, being with her since 15 years old, I mean, and even with that, though, he didn't complain one bit about it. He was just, I think, happy that he had the time with her that he did.
Yeah, I think
Rory,
you're right.
I was a little jealous of their relationship was so good, and I was like, I wish my relationship was so good like that.
Rory, I hate to rush you off, but I really just wanted to say thank you for joining us. We got a lot of people in the back end now waiting
Cool.
to come on. So, any last words? Anything you'd like to say before we boot you?
Just that Bobby was a great guy and loved by many, and we surely miss him right now, and we're gonna miss him a lot, in the future.
Yep.
So
He'll never be
about
forgotten.
it, yeah.
Never.
Well,
And you
thanks.
guys got some really good guests coming up to
Yeah.
speak also.
Rory, we love to have you back anytime, brother. We appreciate it.
Sounds good.
Thank you. my
All
friend.
right.
Bye, Rhory.
Yeah, rest up, Roy.
So, Gary, we got Steve and Danny in the back end here.
There we go. Now we're back on track. All right, Steve.
Hey, you got
Never mess with Steve because he can get really angry.
Me?
Hey, Steve Bloom, thanks for joining us again, man.
Hey, Carlos, like your hat.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a Met fan.
Yeah, Steve, you knew. First off, I've already introduced you, so I'm not going to do that again. But you knew Bobby for quite a while. In fact, you knew about his original arrest back in '82, correct?
Well, I mean, I worked at High Times, as you know, of course, and Bob was a legendary character in the world of High Times. His Tuna was a cover story back in the early '80s when he went to jail, and we followed him. Probably lost track of him somewhat, over the years. I wasn't at High Times when he got arrested and went to jail, and when we did that original story. I came to High Times in the late '80s, and that happened in the early '80s. But we knew of Bob, and when Bob came out, High Times, greeted him and celebrated him. And I think, I'm not sure if he's on the call here, but Dave Bienenstock, he was the guy at High Times who really, he interviewed Bob at that time. He did a great feature story, and he was the one who really dove in. I met Bob around that time. Everybody at High Times met Bob. He came up to the office. We met him at events. He was around a lot. He loved the magazine. He adored High Times, favorite magazine by far. So I'm trying to think back going onto this program, just specific memories, and they're more general. I hadn't seen Bob in a lot of years because he'd been in Florida, and I'd been in Florida, but I hadn't seen him in the years I've been to Florida because our paths didn't cross. I went to a couple of events down there, which he wasn't at. But he always kept in touch. He was one of my group members of my Platshorn group, which was, generous of him. He did an article for Celeb Stoner, my website, called How I Made My Deal with True Leave. I basically took the story that he told me and put it into his words. Bob might have even gotten a little flack over that True Leave deal, but, he believed very strongly in it, and that True Leave was a great partner. True Leave is an MSO. Some people don't love all the big MSOs. I know True Leave dominates Florida, but they were really good to Bob. To say the least. They put his strains out there. They gave him a lot of publicity and probably helped him make some good money towards the end of his life. So good for them, and and their support of Bob. So that's really my kind of memories of Bob, and just obviously, considering everything that's happened in the last few years with the Last Prisoner Project and so many prisoners being released, Bob was out there ahead of all of this discussion of getting the prisoners out. Obviously, that was the goal all along, to get the prisoners out. But, there wasn't such a huge focus on it as there has become in the last couple of years. So Bob, didn't have the benefit of that. He didn't have the organizations pushing for him in the same way they are now. So Bob was a little bit more on his own. I could be wrong on that, but I don't recall, these types of organizations, working in behalf of guys like Bob Platshorn back when, he was stuck in jail for 20, 30 years. So he was a little ahead of the curve on all this kind of stuff and paid the price. Obviously, as people say, Bob, had a good attitude towards it all, wasn't, angry, just wanted to, do his part to help the legalization cause, started the Silver Tour, did everything he could do in Florida, help legalize medical use in Florida. I'm sure, when recreational gets legalized in 2024, which will probably happen, they should maybe name the bill after Bob, because he was, so instrumental in getting so much done and, in what became his home state. He was from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, but, he did so much of his work down in Florida, during the smuggling era. Maybe I'm guessing, but, maybe Bob wasn't angry because he knew what he did was against the law. And he was playing a game, that he could kind of get away with it for so long until he got caught, and then he got to pay his time. Maybe he just accepted it. This is the game he was playing. He knew he could get caught. He knew he could get put away, and that's what happened. He wasn't angry, because, he knew that was the rules of the game he was playing. He was in it deep, and his stories were fantastic. Santa Marta Gold, Columbia, and all that kind of stuff. You could spend the whole time just playing reels of Bob talking, through this whole program, and it'll be just as good as listening to us talk. So that's my experience with Bob, but he loved High Times. I'm sure Danny, and if a Bean's on this call, they can kind of fill in a little bit more with his relationship to the magazine.
Yeah, we got Bean on later on a pre-recorded message because he wasn't able to make it today, but we did get a chance to speak with him, and I'm sure he'll get more into that as well, because I already know what he said, so I'm not going to let on to it too much.
Well, Steve brings up a good point about just Bob being cool. I mean, even if you go to to look at Square Grouper, the Godfathers of Ganja documentary that Billy Corbin, who did Cocaine Cowboys, did on Bob and the Black Tuna Gang. One of the things they say on Wikipedia is that the Miami marijuana smugglers were much cooler, calmer, and nonviolent. And I mean, cool and calm just seem to be two of the words that everybody has brought up about Bob, today.
Yeah, that movie you're talking about, Square Grouper, Bob was very proud. He was one of 3 major subjects in that movie to discuss, the idea of, smuggling, coming out of Florida back in the 70s and 80s. And he was really proud of that movie. He talked about it all the time. Then in his book, were I think his 2 pride and joys besides, personal stuff in his life. But he was really super proud of those 2 things that he accomplished. And those came shortly after, he came out of jail running, man. That guy just like, boom, he had a lot of energy. He needed to get a lot done in a short period of time. He didn't know how much time he had in the world, and he just came out there and boy, book, movie, Silver Tour. What a bundle of energy.
Do you think that his time in prison changed him at all or educated him at all? Changed his views on things from going from the totally entrepreneurship of smuggling to legalization?
It probably did. It's interesting. I don't know it would be the same thing, but Tommy Chong was an interesting, storyline because Tommy went to jail in the early 2000s, and he really wasn't, noted as an activist before he went to jail. And sometimes even the normal folks would get a little annoyed with him. It's like you'd reach out to Tommy Chong, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And he kind of blow it off. Nah, I'm not into legalization or whatever it was his point of view. But boy, when he got out of jail, he was into legalization. It changed his tune dramatically. I'm not saying that's the case with Bob. I mean, Bob probably was for it from day one. But I think when you sit there for all those years, you think about what you can do to change the law when you get out. Absolutely. I mean, he just must have had all kinds of grandiose ideas of what he could do. I mean, Bob should have been the head of NORML. He was so on that level of his knowledge and understanding of cannabis and what he went through. Maybe it's about time that a former prisoner takes over one of these organizations. NORML needs a new head director now. Too bad Bob's not around to take the position.
Hey, Steve, I
know that Randy Lanier was.
Hey, Steve, I just opened up the Black Tuna Diaries, and I wanted to remind you that on the dedication page, High Times is mentioned.
What does it say?
It just says that in the dedication paragraph, the entire staff at High Times Magazine for all of their help.
Yeah.
Up above that, thanking some other friends and his wife.
Yeah, he was a great guy. I mean, I also, since my time here may be short, I also want to mention that we also lost another, important player in the cannabis community out of Florida, Norm Kent. He also passed away just this past week, and I'm sure Norm and Bob were friends. So, sometimes the people in our community, they pass and, they don't really get a lot of recognition. But I will tell you, I chart this stuff with Slepstone. I'm probably first of all the media to cover, when one of our people in our community passes, I usually learn about it. Like in the case of Bob, I had heard he was hospitalized and then suddenly he was in the hospice, and it all happened pretty quickly. So I was keeping my eye on that. And then he passed away pretty suddenly within a couple of weeks of that hospitalization. And it just, the outpouring was phenomenal. I just can gauge it when I write something, I see it on Facebook, I see the number of responses and comments. Versus sometimes somebody else might pass and people just kind of don't even recognize it. Even like Norm, I'm noticing Norm's not getting a lot of attention. It's a nice article today in one of the Florida papers that gives him recognition for his great work. Norm was on the board of NORML and based out of Florida, was a drug defense attorney for years, character, a legend in Florida. I know another person I'd like to mention is we're talking about High Times and somebody who kind of passed away in the last year and didn't get a lot of recognition is Peter Gorman. Peter Gorman was one of our editors back in the 90s and 2000s when I was there, and was really one of the most prolific writers in the history of High Times. And he became famous for his work in the Amazon. He went down there and took people on ayahuasca trips for years, and those trips wore him down, and he didn't survive his last trip last year. Basically, came back to the U.S. and died in a hospital in the U.S., suffering from infections that he would get down there, sadly. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that attention, that sometimes when people pass, it's not really noticed that well. And when Bob passed, boy, he really touched a lot of lives. That's an indicator too. When you see the outpouring when somebody passes and there's so many comments, you just know how many lives he touched. And I think that's
we lost Eddie Leptis last year too, or a year and a half ago now.
Who was that? Gorman?
Eddie Lepp.
Eddie Lepp too. I mean, there's so many. I mean, if not directly in our communities, people, part of, the cannabis world, like Meshulam, who passed away recently. But there, as we age, our the movement that was created in the 60s and the 70s for legalization, obviously people like Keith Stroup, are getting up there, pushing 80, sooner or later they're going to pass, and as I will. But so during, we're just seeing, this era, we're starting to lose, our heroes, and Bob was one of them.
Well, hopefully we can find somebody to fill those big shoes.
Well, Gary, me now coming on to the national board of NORML, there's no way I could fill Norm's shoes. There's no way I can, do the justice that Bobby has done. But they have definitely left a legacy to follow and to honor. And it's my honor to serve on our national board now. And I will do my damnedest to make sure that their memories are honored at every aspect.
And now there's an opening to replace Norm.
Yep.
Right. And congratulations for being on the board. My association affiliation to NORML goes back to my years at High Times. I was kind of the liaison to NORML. Went to all the conferences, knew everybody, got an award there, did a series of benefit albums for NORML called Hempilation, raised a lot of money for NORML. I have a long-term association. Hope they can make a good transition into a new executive director that'll be, the right direction for the organization. Maybe it's time for diversity, or maybe even a woman.
Yeah, maybe.
Indeed. NORML has never had a female executive director.
I'm not sure if High Times is still on the same path that they were before, but hopefully they'll get back on track.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for High Times now because I haven't worked at High Times in 15 years, but I follow them closely, and they're in trouble financially. There's all there is to it. They're in deep debt, and they have debt that they have to pay by the end of this year or by September. Otherwise, the company can kind of get sold off really cheaply. Or go bankrupt or something. I feel bad for High Times because even though the people there I don't know, and I don't know, I'm sure they've brought this on themselves, but just having worked there for so long, it's such a dynamic, legendary, cannabis brand, and I know they're trying to do things, but the magazine has not come out in months. I don't know if Malcolm's on the call here too, but Malcolm. Malcolm McKinnon been talking a lot about, where's High Times? We've been trying to find out, what's happening to the print edition because we haven't seen a copy in, say, 6 months, and nobody will answer any of our questions when we reach out to High Times, what's happening to your print edition. So they had gone into a hiatus during COVID and stopped the print edition for about 5-6 months. Then they're still doing an edition that's digital, I believe, because they are putting out covers and stuff so you can see the latest issue. I think there's a May issue out. So they have problems. They have stores. They have some. I think they might even have 1 or 2 in Florida now under High Times name. So they've been moving in that direction. Putting their name on stores, doing delivery in California. I even understand they're opening up some cannabis cafe in LA. Or supposed to be. High Times makes a lot of claims that they can't really back up these days because they're financially strapped. So they say they'll do things and then they don't do it. They make a deal to buy something, then that deal falls through because they couldn't really do what they were supposed to do. They're a little bit sleazy these days, to be honest. The people running High Times seem a little sleazy. Every deal they make backfires.
That built up over time.
I had to come out with it. Okay, I'll say it. They seem kind of sleazy, but I'm too bad because High Times and NORML, 2 of the biggest, greatest brands in the history of cannabis, and NORML's doing okay. I know NORML probably struggles financially. I know the MPP has been struggling financially. It's a hard time now because legalization has more or less happened in the key states. So they're not funding probably NORML as much now because we got it done. So we don't need your help as much anymore. We're on our own. But in the red states are really tough. Look what just happened in Oklahoma. You try and you fail. So, and the question is, should you even keep trying in those states in that way? In my opinion, maybe just leave it up to the legislature and stop trying to do these ballot initiatives that lose and make us look bad. So, so I mean, so we've got a lot of things on the plate here, but yeah, I mean, NORML, MPP, great organizations, leading the way as always, as we forget that there's still a lot of states that aren't legal.
Well, Steve, we're going to have you back on to talk more about the struggle and about how corporatization is taking over the legalization effort in a whole different manner. Let's put it that way.
I look forward to hearing from my High Times partners that will be following me on the show here, Danny, and if Malcolm's on, I'd love to hear that.
Malcolm actually, I had to bow out. He had a family issue he had to deal with today.
Okay.
but we'll get him. He definitely will come back to us later on too.
Are you getting Chris Goldstein as well?
Yeah, Chris is on deck
From his boat?
Yeah, from his boat.
That's going to be very interesting.
Last I heard, he was off the coast of Baja.
I've been watching all his footage and stuff from, he's going down the west coast of, Mexico right now. I think heading Panama Canal. Unbelievable. What a trek.
Well, thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
the time.
We'd love to have you back anytime,
Thanks,
Steve.
And Mary, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
And next up, Gary.
Oh, well, I can't see it from this side. There's Danny. Danny Danko, the cultivation expert of High Times for almost 2 decades, practically. And Danny, I'd love to talk to you about how much you hate all the strains are in Florida. But we came today to talk about what your buddy and who recently passed, Bobby Platshorn. Where did you first meet Bobby?
Yeah, so I knew of Bobby from being at High Times and sort of being a historian of the magazine, and I knew about that cover article, and it was like the gang that couldn't deal straight, tuna in the can, and all of that. That was kind of the lore at the time, and him serving that long, 29 years, almost 30 years, is just Kafka-esque. He was a living, breathing example of the folly of cannabis prohibition. That this nonviolent gentleman smuggler would get 3 decades, originally 6 decades plus in jail for the crime of bringing a very desirable product to a market that wanted it, and so there was this lore. And then when he got out, I know that Dave Bienenstock, our friend Bean, was the one that interviewed him first, and he, like everyone mentioned, he was like shot out of a cannon when he was released from prison. He immediately, began a crusade. Basically, like he was a pitchman. He became a pitchman for ending prohibition, and he was unstoppable. I highly recommend people, if they haven't, to read the Black Tuna Diaries, to watch the documentary that was mentioned called Square Grouper, and also, you can just Google him or search for YouTube of the Freedom Fighter of the Year award that we gave him in Amsterdam in 2014, shortly after his release, and just you can see the joy in him. I was backstage with him before he received it, and he was just giddy to be in Amsterdam, to be with us from High Times, and then to be receiving that Freedom Fighter award. And he's got his Should Grandma Smoke Pot shirt on, and that, even that whole crusade, like, he wasn't preaching to the converted. He took the fight to the people who needed to hear it the most, the seniors, because he was a senior, but he knew, living in Florida, that was the crowd that would turn it around. Really, it was.
Why,
if you
Danny?
could change, if you could change the seniors' position on this, you really could just end prohibition.
Danny, why do you think he was so successful at that?
Well, I think the background as a pitchman and a smuggler was such that he could sell anything to anybody.
Anything. That's true.
And he could very quickly convince people who, in their mind, they thought they had been taught all their lives that this was harmful and that it should remain illegal. And that's what they believed. He would walk into a room full of people who believed that, and somehow very quickly change their mind, just by being who he was, by being an example of the folly, doing the 30 years, but also having the charisma to basically tell them, like, this is safer than alcohol. This is safer than the pills your doctors are giving you. This will extend your life, and this will also improve your remaining years. And not only that, but your grandkids can still get arrested for this. So he really appealed to these people. He met them right where they were, and directly appealed to them. And I guarantee there wasn't a single time that there weren't people that were converted. I'm sure some weren't, but many people changed their minds, that they had been, they had been fooled by the government and by their peers to fear cannabis. And Bobby was an example, I think, being who he was, a non-violent prisoner who served all that time and wasn't bitter. Everybody mentioned this too. I mean, if he was, he never showed it.
No.
You know, and I don't know how that's possible. I mean, the injustice is so ridiculous. I mean, you could, if you told the story, it would sound like something from, you know, a Soviet gulag. It doesn't sound like it could really happen, that you could do 30 years for a non-violent crime. No gun, no weapon, no one was hurt. And yet, you know, that's what we did, what as a society and as a government to him. And to me, that's no different from, you know, the gulags, and it's Kafkaesque in a weird way. I mean, it's like, you know, and then for him to come out and also be so outspoken and just, like I said, a living, breathing example of the just ridiculousness and injustice of cannabis prohibition. And you know, he comes from that world of the gentleman smugglers, the outlaws. I know you have Bruce Perlowan on as well, I believe. You know, those were the guys who put this all together. I mean, they paid the price, many of them, and but they did it all basically for us. I mean, you know, this was in a time of droughts. You know, whether it be a drought and no one could find cannabis, these were the people who took the risks and brought it, and in many cases paid the price. And so, yeah, I mean, he was great. We got to go to NORML conference in San Francisco together, and to Amsterdam, and to many of the Cannabis Cups. He became a fixture at our High Times events, and really just a joy to be around. And the stories that he told about, you know, prison, but also his life before prison. He lived multiple lives. I mean, the pitchman thing, he was literally on the boardwalk of Atlantic City selling people stuff out of a cart, you know. And you guys mentioned Ron Popeil, and so he was a peer of all of those amazing pitchmen, and I think that stayed with him too, because I think that helped him get through those 30 years. And you know, one thing that also wasn't mentioned, his chef skills were mentioned, but he was also a like award-winning fruit carver. I don't know exactly what the term is, but he could make.
I'm sure that was due to the special knife he was selling.
Right, he could make these beautiful displays out of fruit. I mean,
you could too for $9.99.
Exactly, and he could sell, you know, a ketchup popsicle to
exactly
to a woman in a white dress.
That honestly is one of the things that appeals to me so much about Bobby Tuna. It's just, I mean, I have a background in business, and you know, I consider myself a bit of a marketer, and I really think that helps me more than anything as an activist, because I get to know how to, like, you know, I really think in terms of like how to appeal to people, you know, which you know, doesn't seem like something that a lot of activists do. You know, it's like truth, hammering the truth. And the way Platshorn was able to like deliver a message, I mean, you think about it, like on the surface, underneath there's all this lovable guy, but on the surface it's this guy that was in jail for all this time and was this drug smuggler. And the fact that he appealed to so many seniors and changed the minds of so many seniors, you know, it's absolutely incredible to me. I can't think of a greater feat, a greater way to rebrand yourself than how Platshorn did this. And I don't know, you know, can you speak on that a little bit more? Like,
Yeah. I mean, watching him work a booth was mind blowing. It was an education in how to speak to someone you've never met, how to introduce yourself, how to sell yourself, how to sell your product. I would see people walking away from his booth after just a few minutes of speaking to him. They bought his book. They, you know, you could tell that they were mesmerized. They were just, he had that way of basically just, you know, pitching you, telling you his story, explaining everything. And and basically letting you know that you can't walk away without this book.
But what's really coming to light doing this episode is that, I really didn't know Robert too well, and it really seems like he wasn't exactly branding himself. It just seems like he was put in this unfortunate position of having to do all this time, and he just needed to be his lovable self.
Yeah, no, I mean, I should be very clear. It wasn't a hard sell. It wasn't a hard sell. And I learned so much. I mean, as an author myself who does the same sort of thing, but I don't have that quality of promotion and being able to, and I learned so much from Bobby just watching him in action. And I also had the pleasure of going on one of the fishing trips, the legendary fishing trips, where we would go out, and of course I got seasick, but I was also top hook, so I caught the most fish on the trip, which was a point of pride for me, and I think Bobby was amused as well by that, and I was seasick as well, so it was like all of the full experience, just a couple of hours out on the water, but I got all the experience, and the joy that he took in being out there on the boat with friends was just, it was palpable and enormous, and we've lost an amazing person, a treasure in my opinion, just as a person, as a speaking event, coordinator, a speaker, an author. I loved him, and I think anyone who met him did. And then you have that in the back of your head that this guy served 30 years too, and what would that have done to any one of us? As Rhory mentioned, I don't even know. I would go crazy. I don't know if that I would be bitter. I think I would go insane. And Bobby just, did his time, and and then when he got out, like I said, he was able to make so much of a change, and reunite with Lynn, and live out the years that were taken away from him. I mean, you just think about that. That's not something that you can ever repay someone, the 30 years of time that you took away from them, of their freedom. And Bobby was an example of that. When people would say to us, oh, no one's in jail for marijuana, but that's bullshit. Blah, blah. Bobby, you could point to Bobby and many other prisoners, some who are still locked up, and say, that's not true. Your laws, your mandatory minimums, your crackdown, your war on drugs is a war on us, and it's a war on good people who are just incredible souls, and people who do not belong behind bars for any reason. So that he embodied that.
And Randy Lanier, the former race car driver, he was actually one of Bobby's first roommates in the federal prison. I think it was in Puerto Rico when it was one of his first incarcerations. And Randy wanted to be here today, but he is very busy pushing his new brand, Octane, which you hope to see coming soon through the Cookies brands. But he often talks about his time in this talking with Bobby and reminiscing about the gentleman's smuggling thing, but also talking about what things they could possibly do in the future to make things better if and when they ever get out. Yeah. I think and Randy, we'll talk more on that again when we get a chance to get him back on the air.
Look, Gary, I wanted to go back to something that Danny just shared with us, is the fact that the dehumanization that our criminal justice system has. And Bobby really was someone whose humanity has always shined brightest. And so, the fact is that people label people, criminal, smuggler, all these things, but those are not the labels. Those are not the things we're hearing from people today as they share their thoughts of Bobby. And so I just want people to keep that in mind, that we have a criminal justice system that is purposeful, that it tries to strip people of their humanity. And Bobby was one of those few shining examples that I could say in life I can point to. You can point to Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Bobby Tuna, and you never think that you would hear that name with those other ones. But the fact is that he is one of those few people who have served decades in prison, and their humanity was not diminished by a system designed to dehumanize people.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they didn't break him, and he was able to do so much with the time that he had when he got out. And like Steve said, he did it all very like rapidly. You know, he was making up for lost time. But the fact that they didn't break him just shows his character as well. The fact that he was able to do that and come out and not lose his mind, his sanity.
So the rehabilitation of Robert Platshorn had nothing to do with the prison system. It had everything to do with Bobby Platshorn.
Yeah, and you know, we paid probably millions of dollars to keep him locked up behind bars. It's just
Wow.
absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And this is that injustice is multiplied by thousands all across our country and our world. You can still get the death penalty for cannabis in some places on this planet, and that's you know, that's absurd.
Ridiculous.
And again, Bobby was an example of the absurdity of it. When you met him, you knew that there's no reason to ever put this guy in a cage.
And when he got out, he realized it wasn't a matter of legalize it and they will come. He was more interested in making certain that the patients were educated. And putting the patient above the profit was always, even as he was an entrepreneur, it was the patients that were important, and that was the basis of the Silver Tour.
Yeah, I mean, and even just the provocativeness of "should grandma smoke pot," you know, that phrasing, that that phrase of being that provocative, and then still being able to convince them that this was a better plan. And the stories too. I mean, the smuggling stories, the jail stories, the life before jail, outside of smuggling. I mean, he was a bullfighter in Spain at some point. He was a pilot too. I mean, he flew the planes and we're talking tons of like Colombian Gold and Santa Marta, Punta Roja, the legendary strains that we, just hear tall tales about. He was the guy, or one of the few guys, or hope maybe gals, who brought that here, and to me they did a huge service for us as consumers. So I just
and now I know that Bobby knew how to shiv the bowl.
Well, Danny, now that you mentioned that, it makes me think of the butterfly effect. I recall my grandmother, and my father telling me about some of those strains, and I'm thinking, man, maybe I owe my life to Robert Platshorn, because that was the joint my dad was smoking on his first date with my mom. It's just you never think about the butterfly effect and how those things could impact it. But I remember, my grandmother talking to me about the Panama Red that they had in the late 70s, the early 80s, and if that's in the direct effect to Bobby, then man, maybe I owe my life to the Big Tuna.
Yeah, and the quality of those strains. I mean, this was at a time, like I said, when there were droughts. Every summer there would be a drought of a month or two, where if you didn't know the right people, you were out of luck. And so, as far as harm reduction goes, having that instead of nothing, and with in the face of having nothing, some people might have gone out and experimented with harder drugs, or something like that. And so, to me, what these people did was a huge service and a huge risk, obviously, to them, and many paid the price for that risk. Many are still paying that price, and Bobby obviously is one of them. But again, he turned it all around.
And let's not forget that when we had a choice between domestic and imported, the imported stuff was safe. The domestic stuff was covered with paraquat. And,
it's funny.
I was benefit of that. That's why I still have this in my lungs today.
It's funny that homegrown back then was like a term of derision, and that all that stuff that was coming over was the stuff you wanted, Well,
Danny, we have to have you back on again, because we could talk forever with you guys. I really want to hear more about how you feel about Florida strains. Dying to hear about that. But we have the tape next that we did when we had a chance to interview Dave Bienenstock, a.k.a. Bean, who was the reporter who first took on Bobby's story back in the early 80s. Danny, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Oh,
Bobby.
My bad.
Sorry. Thank you for doing this for Robert and for all of us who are here to honor him and remember him and keep him in our minds and teach the people coming up in this community and industry the stories of our heroes and legends.
Very cool. Thank you.
Danny, we'd love to have you back on anytime. We appreciate you.
Please, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we got the video coming on.
That's right. Roll that beautiful bean footage.
That works. Our next guest is somebody who is a major force both in front of and behind the cameras and also behind all the writing of High Times magazine for so many years. For those of us who happen to be channel cruising and happen to come across Bon Appetit for no reason whatsoever, he's responsible for that. And also actually has some books that have been written and published by Harcourt Brace. Is that correct?
Penguin Random House.
Penguin, yeah. Penguin's a good imprint. They're willing to take the edgy stuff. For no reason whatsoever, he's responsible for that. And also actually has some books that have been written and published by Harcourt Brace. Is that correct?
Penguin Random House.
Penguin, yeah. Penguin's a good imprint. They're willing to take the edgy stuff.
All right, looks like the video's not working.
Well, we'll definitely air that at a later episode. Then you know how technology can be. We're not going to let that put a damper on today's today's festivities and celebration of life for Robert Platshorn. So, but I do want to say a special thank you to Patty, who made a comment earlier. Patty was a companion to Robert's for these last couple years of his life, and Patty, we know that you're going through a lot right now with a heavy heart, but we want you to know that our thoughts and prayers are with you. And to all those who were members of Robert's family and his closest friends who are missing a bit of a hole in their hearts, if you will, at the moment. We just want you to know that light and that love that Robert shared with you all, we didn't want to be, forgotten. And that's one of the reasons why we thought it was important to do this show today. Because as Danny touched on and Steve earlier as well, there are so many luminaries, unsung heroes, if you will, that have pushed us where we are today to end prohibition, that don't always get the credit that they get. You might see them as even characters in some of your favorite movies and such, and not realize that they're based on real people who have gone through real things in life, in particular the injustice of the American criminal injustice system, as one of our viewers put it. And so today is a day for celebration, but also for reflection, and knowing that the work that these folks have done definitely is not over. That it continues, and that we have to pick up the flag and keep marching along. And it was said earlier about Norm Kent. I do want to take a minute to just recognize that Norm was a national board member of NORML, coming out of South Florida. Norm was, an attorney. He was also the publisher of one of the largest LGBT magazines in South Florida, and really, was a gay rights activist that did a lot for that community. It's in no small part to Norm that we've been able to get to where we are today. No small part to the work of Bobby Platshorn to get where we are today. And Florida has some big shoes to fill as far as cannabis activists. And so, joining the board of National NORML is myself and our chair, the former commissioner of agriculture and current chair of the Democratic Party, Nikki Fried. And so Nikki and myself have some big shoes in Florida to fill with taking up that space that Bobby and Norm once fulfilled. And so I just want to make sure that we do right by honoring their memories today.
Now, we apologize for all the technical difficulties. We and a couple of people who wanted to be on at the last minute couldn't. Bruce Perlowin, you have to come back on another time. I know that Chris wanted to be on. Apparently, his boat, which is off the coast of Baja right now, and about to cross the Panama Canal to get to Maryland. There are easier ways to get to Maryland, Chris, than to take a boat from California through the Panama Canal and up. I mean, Chris, you drive back and forth from Maryland all the time. Have you ever taken a boat through the Panama to get back here?
I would say that the boat to the Panama Canal would be a lot more fun because if you think about having to drive from California all the way to Maryland, you have to cross the danger zone of like 10 prohibition states. So if you want to smoke along the way, I would say taking the catamaran from Baja through the Panama Canal is a much more fun and exciting time than it is having to drive through the state of Kansas.
And Chris was the head of the NORML podcast for many, many years. So we look forward to having him on in the future. We're going to have Bruce back on. We're going to have Malcolm back on, who couldn't make it again today. And we will just, at this point in time, sign off with giving you a little bit of clue as to what's going on with NORML right now. We have a big event coming up on May, and we also have a fundraiser going on right now. Isn't that right?
Yeah, Carlos, why don't you go ahead and flash some of those graphics for our fundraiser. Right now, if you go on our website, suncoastnormal.org, there's a big donation button right on the homepage. And if you donate $10, you're going to get one of these custom NORML lighters. But that's like the bare minimum, and every little bit counts. But, our membership packages go for typically $25, and we're running a special right now. If you donate $25, you're not just going to get our normal membership package, which comes with its a membership pin and card. We're also going to give you a medtainer and a lighter that's customized that says Suncoast NORML on them. So you're getting a better bang for your buck with our $25 membership right now. Now, if you want to, become a super member, if you really want to take charge, donate $50. You're going to get all that great stuff in the membership packet, and you're going to get a Suncoast NORML t-shirt so you can rock your swag out there. Now, maybe you're someone who, has a little bit more in your pocket. You really care about us. Donate $100. And we're going to help you with rolling up. That's right. You're going to get a Suncoast NORML grinder. You're going to get the t-shirt. You're going to get the membership package. Now, no true pothead could be complete unless you can step up to the plate and donate $250. Carlos, show them on the screen what they're going to get for $250. That's right. You're going to get a Suncoast NORML glass rolling tray to go with that grinder while you wear your t-shirt. You enjoy your membership pin. You got your lighter to spark up your joint. And I'm trying to channel Bobby Tuna right now because Carlos, that's just not all.
That's
not all, Bob.
That's not all.
One more thing.
We're looking for sustaining members. These are people who can help really sustain our chapter and make things happen. So if you become a sustaining member for $500, we're going to get all those aforementioned gifts. And for an entire year, we're going to run your name on the ticker here at the rotation, and we have a special place for you on suncoastnormal.org to let folks know that you are a sustaining member. Now, maybe you're someone who you pay your dues every year. You don't like that it auto debits. You weren't expecting it, and you just want to get rid of those pesky dues. Well, we are asking right now for those of you who can make it happen to become a lifetime member to Suncoast NORML. For $1,000, you never have to worry about renewing your annual dues. You become a lifetime life member of this chapter. You get all the amazing prizes, and we're going to have you as a life member at the bottom of each episode on the rotation and in the Hall of Fame on our website. So for those of you who feel so inclined, go on to suncoastnormal.org, hit that donate button. We're running these specials now through the entire month of April, and we're going to extend it all the way to May to our Cannabis Action Awards show. Carlos, why don't you flash up the graphic for our Cannabis Action Awards show and let folks know that we are taking the time to honor the contributions and commitments of all those who have been part.
I'm not prepared for that.
Oh, no worries. Well, on Saturday, May 27th in Tampa, Florida, at Hooch and Hive, we are hosting the Cannabis Action Awards from 7 p.m. where the doors open. The award show will start at 8:30 and it'll go to around about 10. But we're going to have a great time with vendors. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, whether you want to sponsor the actual event or if you just want to sponsor an award. Right now, nominations for folks are available on our website. So you go to suncoastnormal.org. We have over 200 folks already nominated, but go out there and nominate your folks in your favorite categories, whether it's best cannabis activist, best educator, best female activist in cannabis. Again, there it is, Saturday, May 27th. We're going to have an award ceremony. We're actually going to be giving out a memento mori award to some of those folks who are no longer with us, including Bobby Platshorn. So for those of you friends and family out there, folks, again, our hearts, thoughts, and prayers are with you. And we look forward to these awards, and we'll be honoring Bobby at the award show as well. And so that's a little bit about what we got going on. Next week, of course, is 420. I'll be here in D.C. Working with our colleagues at Minorities for Medical Marijuana to engage the members of Congress in ending prohibition. Also, I have a national NORML board meeting coming up in June as we look for our next executive director to lead our organization and chapter at a national level. I think it's important that we do take into account a lot of things that were said today of what we need out of a leader. And I really, truly wish that Bobby is with us, because I know he's someone that would take us in the right direction. So I'm going to be thinking of him as we think about what are the great qualities we need in a leader in this movement. And I just want to say thank you to Robert for all his contributions that he's made and the impact he's had on the lives of so many.
And thanks for putting up with us, as we are a genuine semi-professional organization. We've got Carlos here, who's done an absolutely fantastic job with this learning curve of becoming engineer. He loves those sound buttons. We gotta take those away from him every once in a while. But maybe we can hire somebody to give Carlos a break and let him run his store.
I wanted to say thank you to all of our guests. It was a great honor to talk to so many of my idols today. So thank you all for coming on today. I see a lot of you stayed on in the back end, and I'm not going to throw you guys back onto the show just to have so many legends on at one time. But you guys are all incredible. Thank you very much for everything that you've done. You inspire me to do better in the future. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys, for inviting me to join you.
And thank you, Mary. I know how shy you are.
Yeah.
But for coming on and giving us your voice, you've been wonderful.
Thanks.
That's Mary. That's Mary. Hi. And yeah, another day on the rotation, guys.
All right. Well, we'll catch folks next week. Happy 420, everyone.
Peace out.
Before